ring matatagalan pa.
Okay.
So hindi pa ganun nakatanim sa isipan ng mamamayan yun. At medyo mahirap nyo rin maintindihan yun.
An alleged audio recording of Camarines Sur 2nd District Representative El Rey Villafuerte supposedly instructing trolls to create disinformation against Vice President Leni Robredo has been making rounds online.
Yung picture nila, Leni, kasama sila Andaya, nila nakafish sila, gumawa ka, Leni Robredo, mga kakampi, mga scammers sa Abaw. Tingnan mo na agad, tapos yung please, yung pakiusap ko lang yung yung kay Renz para mapadala na yung pera.
Villafuerte has denied that it was his voice. Instead, he blamed the incident on political foes, saying they are using deep fake technology to tarnish his reputation.
We continue our conversations with aspirants for the coming elections, and today we will have with us a candidate aspiring for a seat in the Senate. What are her plans and platforms, and how will she act on her intentions for a better Philippines? We will discuss in this episode of Face the Chiefs. We will be joined by our guest and the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama natin si Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. She's in Manila. She's joining us online. Tapos mamaya sasamahan tayo ni Ed Lingao also of One News. And diretso na po tayo sa guest natin. Alam niyo naman, Fridays, we usually set this aside. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Lahat
Good day.
mapapanood to kahit anong oras.
Good day, Robbie. Good day, and it's nice. Thank you for inviting me. This is my second time with the
Yes,
Chiefs.
welcome back. And that was some time ago. So let's
Online pa yun.
Oo nga.
Kasi
You're one of
pandemya.
our first guests back.
Yes,
So,
yes.
kamusta ang kampanya?
Ay, nako, nakakapagod. But you know, very educational. Kasi yung style ng kampanya namin, nila Ping, is not yung rally-rally. Ours is usually town hall meetings, consultative ang ginagawa namin. So, we usually we talk a little bit, but we listen more.
Doktor na doktor talaga.
Hindi, pero hindi lang ako. Pati si Ping, pati si Tito Soto. Style namin yun na we want to listen to the people. Kaya, you know, when I started, I had a platform, 12 points, no? But now, as I go along, I'm educating myself. Mas marami akong natututunan sa mga tao. Yung mga problema nila, yung mga gusto ng
So what does that mean? Nadagdagan ba yung 12 points or you focused everything
No,
into fewer
mas
points?
naging, mas may laman. Mas desidido ako na iporsige. But the food security became stronger.
Okay.
Because before, it's more health lang. So if you now summarize my platform, it can be summarized as food security and health security. Okay? Then, dugtong-dugtong na yon. Kasama na doon yung climate change resiliency, part of food security, part of sovereignty. It's all, so much is related. No? Pati nutrition, kasama na rin doon. No? So, you can summarize it as that. And including also some education and economy like the MSMEs. But talagang resounding along in the provinces, yung mga farmers and fisher folk.
Food and health.
Food and health.
Okay. Ami.
Really, yeah.
Doctor,
Yes,
pero
Ami.
Doctor, pinapaalala nga sa atin ng World Health Organization, the pandemic is not over.
Yes.
At nag-aalala sila precisely dito sa the way we are carrying out our campaign.
Yes.
Baka daw magka-surge soon, ano? Paano preparedness ninyo for that?
You mean as a policy? The
As
pandemic?
a candidate,
As a candidate, okay.
being a doctor and a candidate, kaya bang anuhin yun? Kaya bang ihid yung warning na yun?
Alam nyo, mahirap talaga. You know, the reality is, no, when you go down sa mga baryo, sa mga tao na marami akong pinupuntahan na baryo na ngayon lang sila nakakita ng senatorial candidate. Ganun kaliblib ang mga lugar na pinapasok namin. Hindi mo maiiwasan na talagang sisiksik sila sa'yo, magsa-selfie sila sa'yo. You know, and you cannot say, ay, wag. You cannot. It's the people who want to hug you, who want to hold your hand, who want to... It's very difficult. You cannot say, stay away. No? Especially if you do... But anyway, the nice thing about naman yung mga lugar na pinupuntahan namin, fully vaccinated naman yung mga pupunta dun sa mga lugar. They control naman the crowds. They're fully vaccinated, temperature checked, wala namang may simptomas, no?
Pero nagmamasking pa ba sila?
Nagmamasking pa ho. Nagmamasking yung mga tao. They wear masks, no? Kami naman mga kandidato, at least in our party, we wear masks. But when we speak, we remove our masks. We spray the mic with, disinfectant, with alcohol. Some of us have a special cover for the mic. But when you're speaking, they also want to see your face. So malayo ka sa tao, pero nakikita na yung mukha mo. Importante rin yun sa kandidato. So, alam nyo, kami naman, we're always taking care of ourselves kasi nakakapagod. You can really get sick, ha? I mean, I'm a very strong person. My resistance is usually is very strong. But I felt talaga there are times nakakapagod talaga. So, it's difficult to really stay away or keep distance. But we have to make sure that the people na pupunta sa mga kampanya ay talagang fully vaccinated. And we're lucky because, I think that, di ba sinabi ni Edsel Salvana na yung Omicron na nakapasok sa atin was the B2A, the tuna, the one that's causing havoc abroad. We got it already. And that's a blessing in disguise. And maybe that's also why our levels are low. But we have to still keep pushing for boosters dun sa mga vulnerable. Kailangan
At
talaga.
mag-rewind nga daw yung immunity yung hybrid immunity from the natural and the boosters. And matatapos pong election natin, we still have the pandemic. And before, at the start of the campaign, you were talking about pandemic preparedness.
Yes, correct.
Can you tell us more about it?
Yes.
Nabago ba yan or what?
Pandemic preparedness is still part of my agenda, no, as part of the health security. Because ang dami natin natutunan. Can I speak Tagalog or English?
Yeah, of course.
What's better? Okay.
Yeah. Taglish is fine,
Because
Tagalog is
kasi alam
fine.
nyo, ang dami natin natutunan sa pandemya. Nabulabog tayo, di ba? And it also showed us the weakness of our healthcare system. We knew it was weak. Alam na natin mahina, pero mas nakita natin gaano kahina, no? In fact, one of the reasons ang tagal-tagal, ang haba-haba ng lockdown natin is because hindi kaya ng mga ospital na kunin lahat ang mga tao na magkakasakit. So, it had an economic effect which was devastating to the economy. We have to make sure universal healthcare is actually now implemented. That's part of pandemic preparedness. 1 bed for every 800 Filipinos. We don't have that until now. Na-delay yung implementation ng UHC. We have to make sure now that there's a lull. We have to make sure it's implemented. Now, pandemic preparedness also includes having the capacity to manufacture our own vaccines. Why do we have to depend on foreigners to manufacture vaccines when India can do it, isn't it? Why can't we actually do it here? Improve our generics manufacturing also, so that we don't have to import these anti-COVID medicines from India. And even the officers of the drug pharmaceuticals companies told me, madaling gawin. Kahit sa kusina mo, basta may good manufacturing practices. Di ba?
But I guess, and we talked about this before.
Yes.
More beds, more hospitals. We can see investments there.
Yes.
Drug manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing here, we can see the private sector getting involved there, maybe incentives and so on.
Yes.
But what about human resource? Yun yung isang malaking usapin parate. What about the doctors and in particular the nurses?
Yes.
In the middle of this pandemic,
Yes.
malinaw na malinaw, we have an oversupply of nurses. At the same time, we don't have enough nurses.
Yeah, there's an exodus of nurses.
Exactly. So
yeah.
what's the solution on the human resource side?
Okay, one is you have to really increase or improve salaries. The only reason they really go abroad is because of the salaries. You know, it's natural, okay? It's very sad, but it's true. Yung mga government hospitals are better off. Their salaries are higher now. Mas mataas na talaga ang salaries. Ang mangyayari naman ngayon, yung mga private hospitals, nauubusan ng nurse. We're feeling it in the hospitals, nauubusan ng mga nurse. So the government has to also help the private hospitals. One is making sure they get their PhilHealth compensation on time. Ang daming utang sa ospital. How can the hospital even pay the nurses better when they can't even maintain the hospital because they don't have payment? Hindi nababayaran on time. So, aside from that, we have to really make sure they have their benefits. Again, it's the budget of the country. That's also up to Congress to pass the budget. It's money, and we have to also give the nurses some professional development, wherein they can be more than just ordinary nurses. They can be nurse practitioners. And that will solve both the professional development of the nurses and the lack of doctors to the barrios, because they can now man the barangay health centers, they can man the rural health units, even without the doctor on site. No? But this will also involve improving our
Technology.
digitalization, our internet, because we can do it. The pandemic taught us, we can do with less people, we can do virtual, we can do a long-distance health. We have to learn from this and maximize this.
But yesterday
diba?
we were also talking about, we were also talking just yesterday, di ba, Ami, with PBED, the Philippine Business for Education. There's a lot of things, of course, to realize na, pwede pala yung distance learning. But PBED was really pointing out, actually, maraming hindi kinaya ang ating technology.
Yes, kaya nga, dapat ayusin yan. No? Because there's a lot of, there's budget allocated for DOCT. It hasn't been all given. Very little has been given. Yun ang problema natin. We have budget allocation, even for universal health care. No? 280 plus billion. Hardly anything has been given. You know, laging ganun eh. There's a budget for the improvement of rice farmers, mechanizing, improving their lot, making them competitive. It's not given. You know, there's always something missing.
When you speak with Senator Ping Lacson, and for that matter, Senate President Tito Soto, what do they say from their experiences? What's wrong with the bureaucracy between the legislative to the executive? What's wrong? Bakit naiipit yung budget?
It's the executive. Because the legislation can only pass the laws. And this is one of the reasons the two of them want to be president and vice president, because they made the laws. They want to execute the laws, because it's really true. When we go around, the problem is always, bakit walang ganito? Bakit walang ganyan? It's the execution of the laws which were made. Now, kulang ng oversight. Because one of the functions of legislation is oversight. And I have realized now that, you know, instead of making more laws, we have a lot of good laws, but they're not being implemented. Hence, I will do a lot of oversight if given the chance, no? A lot of oversight. Kasi parang you keep reinventing the wheel, but you're not making sure that it's working. And that's what we have seen all over the place. Yeah.
But you'll also acknowledge that funding is the real problem, especially in universal healthcare, kaya nga
Yes.
gradual yung rollout niya. Talagang kulang ang pera, and especially with the past 2 years na wala namang pinanggagalingan ng mga taxes.
Well-
Mauna tayo, 12 trillion na utang natin.
Yeah, but they're also borrowing more than they have to. We also realize they're borrowing more than they have to. And there's corruption, like at least 700 billion a year to 1 trillion a year lost to corruption. There's about 260, if I'm not mistaken, billion pesos a year unused because it's brought back to the treasury because the local government refuses to do the projects dictated upon them. You know, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the projects dictated upon by the central and the local. So we have ways to fix this, okay? There is money, like how many trillions of budget or of the loan, we don't have to borrow as much as they are borrowing, you understand? And there's borrowing too much. And we have to look into that as well. And there's so much wastage in government. Over 200 billion for the, which goes back into the treasury, okay? Can't you use that for health? We can. We can bring it down to the barangays, we can bring it down to the provinces, okay? Then we can help with the universal health care. But there's a lot of wastage, there's unused, and there's misuse. So that has to be fixed. And it has to be fixed.
Kalimbawa kung systemic ang tinuturo niyang problema. For example, in PhilHealth, you said you wanted to
Yes.
change the way the funds are being disbursed. Can you be more specific? Kahit isang sample lang ng any reform that you intend to implement po sa
Well, PhilHealth po, it's not just the fund disbursement, it's systemic problems, no? I think when I was here before, I don't know if I discussed the information technology system of PhilHealth is porous and fragmented. Butas-butas ho at patsa-patsa, hindi siya integrated. And you cannot have that for a health insurance company. Kaya, ang nangyayari po, lost money there. COA already said in 2021, they just did a random spot check of hospitals, okay? And they found that 1% of the hospitals had about 8,000 plus people who are already deceased, dead, patay na. Binabayaran pa ng premiums ng DBM. About, if you extrapolate, it's about 4 billion a year. That's just one aspect. Then the same problem with the lack of coordination between the Philippine Statistics Authority, the lack of the bad information technology system, is you keep paying even for people who haven't undergone the services. Again, dead people. Dialysis centers are notorious. I told you about this, I'm not sure. But how they do it is that they make the patient fill up post-dated forms and maybe a year. And you have to stick to that dialysis center when you do not have to actually. No? Then after that, even if you're dead, they can still start filing the complaints. That's a lot of billions lost a year. Again, lost to corruption. That's just one example. Huh? And then, okay, another one, the premium collection. When I was there in 2015, I noticed there was a big hospital, a very big hospital, government, no? University, wherein the employees said, you know, I brought my mother to the hospital and my sweldo, kinakaltasan buwan-buwan ng PhilHealth. Sinabihan ako ng hospital, wala daw akong PhilHealth. Hindi raw ako nagbabayad. Pala, may kakonsyaba yung HR at yung taga PhilHealth. And it's happening a lot. So how can you now say PhilHealth is, actuarially, it's going to die when you're not collecting properly? So we have to look into all of this. And this is oversight. And this, hindi pwede yung, ang problema kasi, frustrating for us doctors and health advocates and those of us who are using PhilHealth for our patients is when we see these investigations not arrive at their logical conclusion. And when they arrive at their logical conclusion, there must be charges filed.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. And I was also thinking, because I personally was working with a group that they were going to file charges in connection dun sa Pharmaly. Sa Pharmaly, no? Kaya lang hindi nila nakuha ang mga ebidensya, hindi binigay. So siguro dapat may people's groups talaga na working very closely with legislation na talagang you give them the opportunity to file cases. And then mag-oversight kaya sa ombudsman. Kasi the ombudsman naman, natutulog yung mga kaso. It's all related. So it's one thing, we can only do so much. But if the legislation also seriously, like a bulldog, like a Rottweiler, does
Yeah.
oversight, I think it can help.
So that speaks to one of the security issues that you point out. I mean, health security. Everybody
Yes.
already knows you already as a
A crusader.
Dr. Mingita, Padilla.
health
But let's talk to the
crusader.
other one.
Food.
Food security.
Yes.
Before you get into particular advocacies, maybe tell us a bit, because you framed it as you went around, you realized
Yes.
na napakalaking bagay rin pala talaga nito.
Yes.
What did you see? What did you hear that really opened your eyes more? I mean, not
Yeah.
just that it's new,
Yeah.
but what opened your eyes even more, making it more focused that food security rin pala talaga?
Alam nyo, okay, for example, sa Bohol, specific, sinabi ng mayor, no, dun sa isang town. Alam mo, akala ko noon, marami na kaming infrastructura. We have infrastructure, we'll be okay. Until the pandemic hit us. Then I realized we had neglected our food. Hirap na hirap kami. Ang mahal ng isda. Kumukuha pa kami sa ibang lugar.
This
You
is
see?
Bohol.
Bohol.
An island.
Exactly. That's the irony of the Philippines. That's just one example. Baguio, Benguet. I have relatives from Benguet, the vegetable capital of the country. They are hurting because of the excessive obscene smuggling of vegetables, especially carrots. Okay, that have formalin. Okay, they last months, diba? That carrots from China, and they don't have a stock. The carrots from Benguet have a stock, and they only last, what, a week, 2 weeks? Because they're pure, they're natural, nothing to preserve it. How come the FDA has not looked into these carrots? How come nobody has actually did a study of do they have chemicals or not? Are we therefore ingesting all these dangerous chemicals? No one has done a study. It should be demanded, of these people. And they can do it motu proprio. Everybody's talking about how come it's clear there's something, it's treated with something, but how come? And the smuggling is broad daylight. And they are just given a slap on the wrist because this is economic sabotage. How come nobody has been punished? Who is behind them? Then the Senate will say, there are big names, powerful people who are the padrinos, mga padrino. Sino sila? Dapat tapusin. Tapusin sana. Yun, yung mga maraming ganun eh. So, and then...
Okay, so what to do?
What to do? Okay. First of all, one of them is the feeds. Abono, mahal ang abono, di ba? Tapos yung mga feeds ng mga isda, mahal din, no? One is rice. Let's go first with rice. Rice Tarification Act. It has to be amended. And the implementation has to be fixed. Because part of the Rice Tarification Act, 35% tariff sa imported rice, di ba? Sabi ko, hindi ba pwedeng mas mataas yun? Hindi pwede kasi yun ang agreement sa ASEAN, 35%. No? Sa Korea, it's like 600% yata in order to discourage importation. Now, that tariff is supposed to go to what? To the Rice Competitive Enhancement Fund. Dapat yun, tulungan yung mga rice farmers para mag-modernize, mechanize, di ba, libreng abono, libreng irrigation, etc., mga gamit, hindi nangyayari. So dapat mangyari. So we have the law. We have to make sure it's implemented. Okay, that's one. And that's nandaing lahat ng mga rice farmers and even rice millers. And the rice millers, they said government must provide freezers for the rice, for the palay, because other countries, they do. And then here, they say mahal. Mahal, but we need it. Now, paano hindi magiging mahal? Dapat, this is again related, even to climate change and environment. When you have rice here, you have the darak, you have the offshoots of that can be used for biofuel to fuel the electricity of the freezers para hindi mahal. So you can have a self-sustaining agri-industrial area, which is one of the solutions, okay? Self-sustaining agri-industrial. One of our co-senators is Manny Piñol, and I enjoy really talking to him and learning from him because he's a farmer. And ang daming ginagawa. One more solution we found, mahal yung mga feeds na mga isda, na mga baboy, yung mga manok feeds, no? Meron na tayong very cheap alternative na ginagawa, research and development, gawa sa munggo, malunggay, etc. No? High in protein yung munggo. They're using it now. We will save a lot of money on feeds if we do more research and development. It's being developed now, not much, but government is not supporting it. So all of these things we can do.
Okay.
We can do. Dami, no?
Still related to public health. Ang sabi ng mga tao, the drug problem has to be approached from a health perspective. Kung mananalo po kayo, are you planning to introduce reforms by way of public health?
Yes,
in carrying out the campaign against
yes,
drug.
definitely. Yes, definitely, Ami. Definitely. Because it's two-pronged. There's the law enforcement and there's the rehabilitation. I have been the president of the Drug Abuse Research Foundation there. I inherited it from my uncle, no, who died suddenly. And we had a big drug rehab center in Cavite. But we couldn't compete with governments. No? Although the dare is still there, it's more like clinical na lang. You have to remove the demand. Because drug rehab is not just a simple case of, okay, dalhin mo sa clinic or sa ano, tapos pagkatapos 6 months, labas mo na. That guy's gonna relapse, okay? There has to be a community support. So yes, we have to treat it as both a disease and a crime, no? Because the crime is among the pushers, the drug lords. And one of the things, our party, actually, one of the things we have agreed upon is we have to have a separate jail, a separate high security facility for these drug-related criminals who are the pushers, who are the drug lords, so that they can no longer operate. The problem is kasi, they still operate inside the jail. Dapat hiwalay sila, walang cellphone, na isang isla, na maraming pating around, nasa dagat. I mean, talagang grabe, parang Alcatraz in a way, no? Separate them from the rest of the criminals. And do a lot of rehab and education. And the rehab has to be such that it's not just ordinary, because each drug dependent has a different need. Hindi pare-pareho yan. That should also be part of the education.
Okay.
And wait, also in school. It should be taught in school.
Yeah. And that's, again, addressing the demand side.
Demand side, yes.
But just strictly speaking, on the supply side.
Yes.
You know, the pushers, the manufacturers, the suppliers, and
Yes.
so on. Just talking about the supply side, that's the same thing that President Duterte said with Oplan Double Barrel. Diba? Parang sige, there was also an aspect to the DOH under Duterte saying there is a health aspect here also, and so on and so on. But really, their supply side interventions also had to do with, we have to be really strong, walang biro-biro dito, ikulong lahat. What will be the difference? Just talking about the supply side.
There will be one standard for all. The problem is, some got away with it. Some big-time pushers or drug lords, what we know of, they escaped. They were not caught. It's like there's a double standard. No? You don't know if it's serious or not. No? And there's so much we hear about, no? that these are friends of powerful people. They don't get caught. No? And I think very important is a single standard for all. I think that's going to be different. Depends also on who the president is, okay? Depends on the president. But that's necessary. A single standard for all. No double standards. If this reputed drug lord is a friend of a powerful person.
What's the strongest penalty in that single standard?
Oh, life imprisonment. Because we're not going to have the death penalty.
Okay.
Life imprisonment in that special facility, not in a regular facility.
Ping Lacson and Tito Soto are really completely,
Yes.
categorically no longer
No
about...
longer death penalty. Yes.
Okay. What
Yeah.
turned them around?
Many things. No? Well, actually, I know that Ping Lacson, it was because of an epiphany during Netflix. It's so
Ang Netflix, napaka-powerful talaga sa Pilipinas. Ano?
He watched the movie.
Yeah, concern Narcos.
Hindi narcos, hindi narcos. Hindi ka makaka-epiphany sa narcos.
Sige.
Magiging violent. No, it was about the life of, I forget the name. He was a man who, he actually, just to prove that an innocent man can be met at the death penalty, remember that? He actually framed himself. Okay? But he taped everything so that somebody knew it was actually a setup of himself. And he went through the motions, and he went through the trial, and he was sentenced to death. An innocent man was sentenced to death, but he was framed. But he went through this motion. And it sort of was an epiphany. And he admits it, and he's not ashamed to admit it. And he said, hey, yes, it's true. So it's true, the saying, I'd rather see a guilty man set free than to see an innocent man put to death. Si Tito Soto naman, he said, he found this solution, which was, this sort of facilities. No? Because the problem with the drug lords is that they can continue to operate inside the cell. Inside. So he said, nagkatugma daw, this is their story, I'm just repeating it, nagkatugma daw yung kanyang epiphany of a sort, no? Tungkol sa may ibang solusyon. With the epiphany naman of Ping Lacson through Netflix, no? And it had a meeting, no? I mean, this is their story. I have just repeating the story. And it's actually nice because I myself, most of those who are met with the death penalty are those who cannot afford also the good lawyers.
Yeah.
And we know it's also related to poverty.
Yeah.
So how do you know how many of those are actually innocent?
Yeah,
and
but here's my question. What you're saying is what many human rights lawyers and NGOs have been saying for years.
I know.
Diba? Why should it take one lucky epiphany?
Yeah, well,
and why couldn't the tandem just listen to the data, just look at the data and listen to all of the civil society, all of these Senate hearings?
Yeah. Well,
why couldn't it have been that?
You can ask them. No? I don't know. I don't know because I am not them. But that's what they said. No. Me naman, I have never been for the death penalty. Okay. Because I also know that again, our justice system has a problem. No, and the certainty of punishment. This is a cliche, but the certainty of punishment is more powerful than a possible death penalty to deter crime, no? The certainty of punishment and a good judicial system. That's what I've always felt and believed. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Mingita Padilla, tumatakbo po sa pagka-senador. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Already?
Yes.
Oh
but
my
we'll
gosh.
give you another 30 seconds or a minute or so just for your final message to our viewers.
Will I look there?
Yeah, anywhere.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me here sa Chiefs again, no? Ako po isang doktor, si Dr. Mingita Padilla, tumatakbo bilang senador, number 48 sa balota, asking you to please consider voting for a doctor who's been serving the country for 34 years. Marami akong ambag, marami akong puhunan na talino, karanasan, at pagmamahal sa bayan. Yun po ang aking puhunan. And if given the chance, talagang I will serve you with integrity and all my heart. Take care ng kalusugan at pagkain ho. At least yung dalawang yon, pupursigin natin, tututukan ho natin. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, ulitin po natin yung number 48, Partido Reforma po, kandidato sa pagkasenador, Dr. Mingita Padilla.
Maraming salamat
Maraming
po.
salamat po.
Thank you, Ami. Thank you, Robbie.
Doctor. Thank you.
We will need to take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back. Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama pa rin po natin si Ami Pamintuan ng Philippine Star. And now joining us here in the studio, Ed Lingao of One News. Bok, welcome.
Hello. Happy weekend.
And ikaw na magpakilala ng next guest natin.
Okay. Now joining us is Comelec spokesperson, James Jimenez. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Thank you. Good evening, Ed. Good evening, Robbie and Ami.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for
Good evening, sir. Well, sir, we understand that the Comelec has already approved yung release ng fuel subsidies for PUVs. Pero pending pa rin ata yung fuel subsidies for the agriculture sector. I think they've been waiting for that at least the last I heard, pending pa rin yun. Any updates on that?
I'm sorry, Sir Ed, kasi hindi pa nare-release yung resolution, ano? So we're just going to have to wait on that. Hopefully by Monday, mailabas na yan.
But in all likelihood, sir, mag-grant naman siguro kasi nag-grant yung sa transport sector eh.
Well, depending on on the terms of the grant of the subsidy, no? Kasi kahit yung sa fuel, merong mga conditions na inattach yung commission, particularly with the implementation of the subsidy. So that would really be very interesting to look at pag lumabas yung reso.
Well, sir, the other thing that people are watching out for is yung vote buying task force. What do we have so far on that?
Well, as far as the vote buying task force is concerned, no, this is under the direction of Commissioner Amy Ferolino, and they're looking to help streamline yung filing ng cases against vote buyers. And in fact, nakita na natin with the early coordination with various agencies, no? Interagency po kasi ito. We're actually moving forward with at least one complaint, no, of vote buying. Kung saan, again, with the guidance from the task force, nagkaroon ng evidence, nagkaroon ng complainant, nagkaroon ng witness, and mukhang umuusad yung kaso sa ngayon. So we feel like this is a model that will work in general. And we're reaching out to other organizations and other civic organizations na gustong makipagtulungan. No? One of the things that, hindi naman sa pinangungunahan natin si ComAmy, but I think one of the directions that they're going to take is to give these different groups at least a format, no? A format for filing a complaint para matulungan sila sa pagbubuo ng mga kaso.
Yung case na yan, is that the one in Quezon City na meron pang mga accompanying video
Yung
ng
kay Nono?
pagbibigay ng envelope?
Yan po yan.
So, a-accept nyo yung mga ganong klaseng evidence, yung video, yung camera, taken ng camera.
Basta po may kasamang complainant and merong actionable information, then yes, hindi naman inaatrasan ng Comelec yan.
Sir, what do the rules say as far as proving vote buying is concerned? For example, kasi most of the people who are accused of vote buying are not naman the candidates eh. Most of the time nahuhuli sa mga ganyan on video or ng affidavits are those who are just supporters. How does one legally and judicially link a candidate to vote buying, if at all?
Well, remember the law on vote buying does not really specify that it should be the candidate who's doing it, right? So basically, it's anyone who gives money in exchange for a vote or a promise of a vote.
Yes, sir.
So again, as far as the law is concerned, kung sino man yung namimigay ng pera, yun yung huhulihin natin.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Ngayon,
yes, sir.
kung gusto nating maabot with liability yung kandidato mismo, then one of the things that you have to show is that the candidate knows or approves of what's being done, no? Especially if it's been done in their name. So it's really about what you can prove in court. That's
Yes,
what
sir.
matters.
But isn't that impossible, virtually impossible?
Mahirap-hirap.
I don't think it's impossible, especially if you can prove it. Again, this underscores the necessity and the importance of having a complainant and witnesses. Again, with all of these things in place, you can actually make an argument about certain conclusions that you want to reach. Depende na lang yan sa abogadong mag-prosecute.
Yeah, speaking of what's impossible and what you can actually prove in court, I want to ask you about now allegations of deep faking. I want to start with that because, of course, I'm referring to this audio clip that's going viral. There's a lot of speculation. Supposedly, it's El Rey Villafuerte. El Rey Villafuerte, we have to say, has denied this. He's saying it's deep fake. And he says he intends to file a complaint to try to get to the bottom of this. But I imagine that's a kind of thing that's, it's new. We're going to get more and more of such complaints, whether it's allegations of somebody conspiring to create black propaganda or somebody claiming that that's black propaganda against me. Where do candidates and campaigns even begin to take on tackling this kind of a complaint? Because on another level, it also is a genie in a bottle, talking about deep fakes.
Well, they have to go against the people who released those deep fakes, no? This is an action against the people who actually made those materials, video or audio, kung ano man yan. That's where their action lies. They have to prove that that certain individuals with malicious intent tried to frame them essentially for something that they did not do. Okay. So that's their recourse. No? That would be. I'm not quite sure, especially when it comes to deep fakes. Not quite sure what law is being violated, but obviously something is being violated. Unfortunately, I can say for sure that it's not an election law. No? Okay. This is not
cybercrime, probably something under cybercrime.
Probably under cybercrime, but I'll have to review that law again. Sorry.
Let's get to something that suddenly looks more easier to handle. Let's talk about COVID. Kasi mas ganun kasalimuot yung deepfake and trying to prove anything in terms of even vote buying. But COVID, WHO is now warning that we're heading into a perfect storm. A lot of the surges in the past, not just here but in other countries, have been driven by the religious festivals and election season. Now we're going to have both over the coming month, not just Holy Week, Ramadan as well, and then election season. What additional precautions or even scenarios are coming into picture?
Well, the good thing about Ramadan, speaking about Ramadan specifically, is that it's about Ramadan is about fasting. So I guess the tendency of people is to really stay away from gatherings, right? So at least in that regard, that's a break. But as far as other things are concerned, I think it's the coming elections that's making everyone worry, and certainly it's making us worry as well. On the part of the Comelec, although we recognize that there has been a relaxation in a lot of the IATF mandated security protocols, safety protocols, Comelec is maintaining a lot of its own protocols. For example, we're still going to field isolation polling places, even though right now a lot of people are saying that we might not need them. We're still going to maintain them. We're still going to maintain the social distancing requirements as well as the masking requirements for our voting centers. We're still maintaining that our voting centers will have restricted access, that only voters will be allowed to enter, and those with election business, and those without who are not going to be voting or just going to be loitering in those precincts will of course be escorted out. So a lot of the most basic security protocols, safety protocols that we put in place when the pandemic was at its height, they will still remain. We're probably not going to go back to face shields anytime soon, but certainly that is an escalation of the protocols is not ruled out. No, again, we have to look at the possibility of a surge happening before election day. Although, of course, right now people are saying that if there's going to be a surge, it's going to happen after the elections, because it's the elections that they're pointing to as the super spreader.
Well, kung magka-escalation of protocols, at the start of the campaign, you said violations will be considered election offenses. Ganun pa rin ba yung attitude ninyo?
Dinowngrade na po yung resolution na yan Ma'am Ami. Dinowngrade po yan. In fact, right now, you can campaign without securing a Comelec permit. So, well, yeah, I know what was in the old resolution, but unfortunately that's been downgraded now. Again, sinasabayan po yung guidelines ng IATF naman.
So wala nang natitirang violation sa campaign kung sakasakali, yung mga kissing, yung mga ganun-ganun, wala na yun. Hindi na siya offense.
Well, hindi po siya election offense, pero patuloy kami magpapaalala na social distancing has to be maintained, and kasama sa social distancing, of course, yung halikan, yung hawakan, yakapan, especially on the campaign trail.
O sige, yung iba mas immediate naman na concern. This Sunday, mag-umpisa yung overseas voting. Kumusta?
Yes.
It was suspended in several areas, di ba? How are the preparations?
Sa Shanghai PCG po, sa Shanghai, ang sinususpend natin because they're under lockdown in Shanghai. So suspended po. But so far, wala namang kaming sinususpend elsewhere.
So tuloy-tuloy yan.
Tuloy-tuloy po, April 10 po.
Wala kayong nakikitang problema ngayon at this point.
Well, sa ngayon po, wala naman kasi ongoing naman yung mga preparations for the most part na nangyayari naman. And for the rest, voting by mail naman sila. So there should not be too much of a problem with the pandemic.
Okay. Well, we're not calling them hotspots anymore. That's something we've taken note of. We're now calling them areas of concern. Is this just a nomenclature change, or is there actually a real difference here?
Well, we've actually stopped calling them hotspots like 4 elections back. We've been calling them areas of concern. Of course, the name change takes a while to sink in, but yeah, now we're calling them areas of concern. It's I guess one of the reasons mentioned a long time ago when that name change was made was that calling a place hotspot had disruptive effects on the local economy. People started, being more afraid, etc. So we've transitioned to a graduated scale. So it's not just an area of concern. Now we're talking about areas being green, yellow, orange, and red. Escalating levels of potential for violence.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at now. We're looking at red areas, we're looking at yellow areas, green areas, etc.
And beyond the names, I guess the more important thing for people to understand is what are the factors that go into whether you're green, yellow, orange, or red?
Well, green clearly is like everything's fine, no problem. But when we start talking about the other colors, that's when you see things like the history of the place coming into play, right? If you have a place where there is a history of political unrest or political disturbances, then you start looking at it as an area of concern. A place with a history of political violence, for example, will be on that list. And now, from that point, it depends on the day-to-day assessment of the area by the PNP and by the local Comelec to see if you're becoming a flashpoint for potential violence. The more likely violence is going to break out, then the brighter the color on the scale of alert levels. So we're looking at places that are under red category. Those are the places where violence can potentially erupt at any time. As compared to, let's say, a place that's under yellow alert, where you have a place that has a history of violence and a potential only for disturbance to happen, but nothing imminent. Red can also mean the presence of armed groups in the area, as well as the presence of an insurgency or an armed rebellion. So these are the general standards that we use for these classification schemes.
Mr. Jimenez, there's still a pending disqualification case against Bongbong Marcos.
That's right.
Can we expect a resolution before Election Day?
Well, sinabi po ng aming chairman, no, ang kanyang commitment is that he would release it by the 3rd week of April. So hopefully we're looking at the resolution very soon.
Pero it can be appealed sa Comelec muna, di ba? Can be appealed to Comelec or diretso sa Supreme Court?
That will be a division decision. So, appealable po yan sa Comelec. But of course, they can also go straight to the Supreme Court kung gusto nila.
Sir, balikan ko lang yun, no? Yung issue ng vote buying. For the guidance of our viewers, especially those who are really interested in the topic of vote buying, what do they need to capture on video if it is to stand up in court? What are, I suppose, the parameters or the elements that have to be caught, whether on video or in photos, that would make sense in court?
Well, as we've said before, no acts, video or video recordings of the act being performed, bigayan ng pera, bigayan ng other things, no, not just money. Kasi in the past we've seen examples of vote buying being carried out with, live animals, stacks of vegetables, etc. The act of giving, the transaction itself, being caught on video will be very strong evidence. However, just to point out, kailangan po mayroon talagang witness. Hindi ka pwede mag-surface na lang ng video out of nowhere and then leave it on the doorstep of the Comelec. Hindi naman pwede ganun.
Yes, sir. But at the same time, I suppose the video or the material has to have context. Kasi,
Exactly.
an image of money in an envelope does not really mean anything or does not really prove anything either way. Diba? It has to have context.
Kaya po mahalaga na may complainant at may witness because you have to put everything into the proper context. Again, as I said, you can't come up with a video and just drop it off somewhere and say, yan. Hindi pwede yan. You're going to have someone stand up and say, I took the video, this is what is happening when I took the video, this is what I thought I was seeing, and so on. So again, the problem really is that for many people who are not looking at this from a legal point of view, the mere existence of a video would be enough, right? But again, based on the question of what can you prove, then that becomes a more complex legal question.
Yeah, Director Jimenez, last question na lang. I mean, to that point, I think, because for a lot of people, there's a personal barrier as well. A lot of people can't imagine, not just with this, but even with our justice system, a lot of people can't imagine it actually coming to fruition. And something actually, just quickly, does it happen? Have complainants come forward, and have we actually gotten cases resolved that we actually got candidates disqualified and, for that matter, convicted, and nangyari na ba yan? Somebody complained and it turned out to be a successful complaint. Maybe that can encourage people. I hope.
We have pursued a vote buying case to a successful conclusion. We've had people disqualified and unseated from office. We've also lost some people. We've lost jurisdiction over some people because after the case was filed, they went ahead and won, but their case moved on to a different tribunal, right? We've had successes, and unfortunately, we've had more failures. Unfortunately, because cases get dismissed all the time. Sometimes cases are promising. They start out well. You get the prosecution, and then the witnesses drop out, and then the case loses. Right? I mean, the case is lost. So we've had both examples. We've had successes, and unfortunately, we've had failures as well.
So you're saying,
lang, can witnesses ask for protection from public exposure? Parang anonymity lang. From public exposure lang.
Yeah, well, isa po yan sa mga pwedeng itulong ng ating task force, no? They can facilitate that process for the complaining witnesses. That's exactly what the task force is for, because task force really brings into play interagency cooperation.
May witness protection din sila.
Kasama po yan kasi kasama namin ng DOJ eh.
Okay, Director James Jimenez, spokesperson po ng Comelec. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jimenez.
Good night.
And that will be all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.